Welcome to Reading the Gospels Together for Wednesday, June the 24th, and today we're reading Luke chapter 24. We're going to look at the first of those four main sections of this chapter, and the first one is the discovery of the empty tomb in verses 1 through 12. There's a lot here and a lot I want to talk about, so let's get to it. Luke starts this way. He says, on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they'd prepared, and then they went to the tomb. Now, the first day of the week, it may surprise you to learn that the word Sunday does not appear in the Bible. It's referred to as the first day of the week. How do we know that the first day of the week then is Sunday? Because it's the day which follows the end of the Sabbath day, which concludes at sunset on Saturday, also incidentally not mentioned. All the Gospels indicate that Jesus was crucified on the Friday, just prior to the onset of the Sabbath, that nothing happened on the Saturday due to the restrictions of activity on the Sabbath, and that the women went to the tomb on the morning following the conclusion of the Sabbath, which is Sunday. Now, the book of Acts tells us that the early Christians continued to worship at the temple until they were unwelcome there. They then continued to gather on Sundays, which became for Christians the holy day, in recognition of the resurrection. When the Jewish branch of Christianity became heavily outnumbered by non-Jewish Christians, which we call Gentiles in the Bible, eventually Sunday became regarded by Christians as the new Sabbath. And it was formalized in the 300s as the day of worship for Christians. Now, this was a point of some tension in the early church, which Paul addresses in his letter to the Christians in Rome, which was a mixture of Jewish and Gentile believers. In Romans 14:5 and 6, he writes, "One person considers one day more sacred than another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind, and whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord." And for us, that day has become Sunday. Christians in the Seventh-day Adventist Church regard Saturday as the appropriate day for worship. For Jews, Friday sundown to Saturday sundown remains the Sabbath day. Paul advises us not to consider this difference and these differences as cause for division, but whichever day we worship the Lord on, to glorify God through that. But back to Luke. The women took the spices they'd prepared and went to the tomb. Now, Luke told us earlier in chapter 23 who these women are. The women who followed Jesus from Galilee, about whom we read earlier in Luke that they'd financed the ministry of Jesus out of their own resources and accompanied him and the disciples on their travels. At the end of chapter 23, we read that they attended both the crucifixion and the entombment of Jesus. Immediately after, they prepared the elements for the proper burial observances. The intent of the spices they were preparing was to mask the odor of the body, as visitation of the tomb would go on for at least 4 days, according to tradition. So generally, when somebody died, the body would be washed and prepared. It would be wrapped in linen together with spices to make the visitation time less unpleasant. But the women were in for a surprise. We read, "They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus." While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. Well, that would be startling, to say the least. Remember at the Transfiguration how Jesus' clothes gleamed like lightning. This seems to be a favorite color for heavenly garments. It's a good sermon illustration to point out that the purest white light is actually a combination of all the colors together. That seems right for heaven. It's perhaps these 2 angelic men who will appear at the ascension of Jesus. In their fright, we read, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here, he's risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered over again to the hands of sinners, to be crucified, and on the 3rd day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. Now, I can never tell from reading this passage what's going on in the minds of the angel messengers. Are they amazed? Are they exasperated? Are they frustrated at the slowness of the human mind? After asking the women why they're looking for the risen and very much alive Jesus in a graveyard, they then say, "Remember what he told you." So often Jesus has told his followers what would happen. Arrest, trial, crucifixion, resurrection. Arrest, trial, crucifixion, resurrection. Arrest. He says it 3 times at least and hints at it other times as well. Yet here they are as though they didn't believe what he'd said. Or incredibly, as it appears, they forgot. As Luke says, then they remembered his words. If somebody tells me, something terrible is going to happen to me, but don't worry, because after I die, I'm going to rise again from the dead, that would stick in my mind. But somehow they forgot. So again, I wonder what the opinion of angels is concerning us. Go through the New Testament, you'll find you can read much of what they say in an exasperated tone of voice, and it reads pretty accurately. If you don't believe me, ask John the Baptist's father, who was struck dumb for doubting Gabriel's message, who got pretty testy. Or the disciples in the first chapter of Acts, to whom the angels say when Jesus ascends to heaven, "What are you standing around for? Get going!" Anyway, back to Luke. When the women came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. Now, notice it's now the 11. It was 12, but Judas is no longer with them, of course. But it's not just the 11. We're told there are also others, Luke tells us. They told the 11 and the others. We're also told that in addition to Mary, Joanna, and the other Mary, there were other women who were at the tomb as well. We're gathering quite a crowd here. Now, once again, we have to expand our visual image beyond the apostles to include a group of women as well as other followers. But here comes the hard news. But they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering to himself what had happened. Now, why didn't they believe the women? Their words seemed to them like nonsense, writes Luke. Apparently, as with the women, the others didn't really believe Jesus when he said he would be raised. Nevertheless, it's astonishing that the women are the first witnesses. As we said in our other studies, women were not considered reliable witnesses, and their testimony was not readily admissible in court. It's small wonder that they weren't believed. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing just after this time, says, and apparently he's quoting the law of Moses, "Put not trust in a single witness, but let there be 3, or at least 2, whose evidence shall be accredited by their past lives. From women, let no evidence be accepted, because of the levity and temerity of their sex." Well, Josephus wouldn't do very well in our current social climate, but he would have fit right in with the 11 and the others who didn't believe the testimony of the women. But Peter believed them enough to run to the tomb and have a look for himself. In fact, if they're meeting at the traditional location of the Last Supper, the same room that they had arranged to have the Passover meal in, and that seems likely if they're meeting there, it's a solid 10 to 15 minute, a good brisk 15-minute walk to the place of the crucifixion. I've done it many times. Peter, however, ran, which I've not done, so he got there quicker. The linen strips or burial shroud, we read, were still there, but by themselves, no body. The angels had left as well. And Peter goes away, we're told, wondering to himself what had happened. Now, when you read linen strips, by the way, don't confuse that with mummification. Don't picture a mummy with all of the strips like that. The process in that area and time was to allow the body to naturally decay, and then a year later to collect only the bones, which would be placed in an ossuary or a bone box for keeping safe in a tomb or burial site. Now, Luke leaves us there, in suspense. The angels shaking their heads, the frustrated women not being believed, and Peter walking away baffled. But tomorrow, Luke reintroduces us to Jesus. So make sure in preparation for that, you read the lengthy account of the encounter with Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and we'll see you then. I'm looking forward to it.